An online anime artist is suddenly kidnapped by a psychotic woman who seems to be out of touch with reality. Trying to find a way to escape, she is faced with the true sinister nature of this kidnapper, who doesn't only physically hurt, but she also mentally torments her. Hi folks, I'm R, and welcome to a story which makes you realize yandere girls in real life are a bad idea, and they are nothing like they portrayed in movies, animes, or books. Keep in mind that this video will have spoilers as always, and with that said, let's begin. Tied up to a tree deep in the forest with a gag on, the protagonist can't think of anything other than being so cold, close to passing out and dying. With her thoughts drifting away, thinking about how she would die any day now, a young woman, well-dressed and well-maintained, comes to her, someone she recognizes so well. The woman is no other than her captor, who has been keeping her in the forest for long periods of time, tying her securely, gagging her, and leaving her with no food or way of releasing herself. As the woman observes her victim, she looks at her with disgust, noticing that she has soiled herself, being appalled by what she's done, telling her she's so pathetic and that she couldn't even hold herself, even though she's been tied to a tree for such a long time. That's when a bright light, seemingly like a flashlight, hits the protagonist's eyes real hard, almost blinding her, which makes her confused to who might be accompanying the kidnapper. That's when her captor removes the gag and mentions in a cheerful way that her living arrangements have changed and that she can take her with her and keep her at home. The protagonist, in pain and in debilitating cold, only thinks about being in a warm and dry place, dismissing the fact being trapped in a house would be much worse, as her chances of finding someone for help reduce dramatically. Nonetheless, it's better than the forest, as she fully knows she wouldn't survive much longer in there. The woman eventually puts a blindfold on the protagonist, implying to her that she shouldn't resist, explaining how she's sorry about the traveling arrangements last time and the bruises the protagonist sustained. As she's fully blindfolded, the protagonist hears another person step out of the car and help the woman drag her on the floor, pulling her inside the car, which makes her fully give up even resisting or complaining, as she knows better that the woman is a psychopath and she would punish her for any challenges that she faces. This time, any resistance would be completely useless, as she's up against two rather than one. Placing the protagonist in the car after what feels like hours, with absolute silence on the way, the car comes to a final stop when both kidnappers gently take the protagonist out of the car, open a door and take her up a flight of stairs, but eventually they drop her to the ground like a bag of garbage, which could indicate that they were gentle before, as if trying to act normal amongst other people. The protagonist then hears a faint thank you by the woman said to the other kidnapper when the door closes and the woman removes the blindfold soon after. Observing the inside of a room, the psychotic woman explains how she cleaned the room just for the protagonist to make it more presentable. The woman, still complaining about the protagonist's stench of soiling herself, as she couldn't hold herself, she quickly leaves to get her some food and arrange a cleanup for her, when the protagonist is left to her thoughts, thinking how this is much worse, as she's trapped in a room with minimum chance of anyone finding her. Thinking about an escape plan, she becomes disappointed by the horrible conditions her legs and feet are in after being zip-tied for so long, thinking of how she wouldn't be able to walk. As she starts to concentrate and looks around the room, she finds her art printed and put on the walls, realizing that the kidnapper must have known her from before and specifically targeted her. She seems to be a psychopathic stalker, obsessed with the protagonist, who seems to be a somehow well-known artist, who kidnapped her just to be by her side, even though she doesn't have any concept of normal human interaction and how the counterpart needs to be equally willing to engage. The woman soon comes back with oatmeal, explaining that she wanted to prepare the protagonist's favorite meal, but she couldn't due to not having much money. She further explains she forgot the spoon in the forest, being forced to feed the protagonist with her bare hands, saying that the protagonist is dirty anyway, so she shouldn't mind, completely dismissing the potential wishes of the protagonist, whether she would like to be fed by hands or not. As she takes the protagonist's gag off, she warns her not to make a mess protagonist as she hates cleaning and warns her not to bite her fingers. As she feeds the protagonist, she leaves her fingers in her mouth, starting to feel inside her mouth, moving the food around. The protagonist being very confused and taken back, realizing more and more how insane the kidnapper is. She starts feeling the oatmeal, tasting and feeling very odd, as if sensing something wiggling and crawling in her mouth. Not being able to withstand the odd sensation, she takes a closer look at the bowl of the oatmeal, noticing in horror that what she has been fed was live maggots. As she starts feeling sick, about to puke, the kidnapper puts her hands against the protagonist's mouth, preventing her from puking. The kidnapper threatens the protagonist to swallow, as otherwise she would kill her. Left with no other choice, the protagonist swallows hard when she feels the kidnapper's grip become looser. The deluded woman then proceeds to take the protagonist into the bathroom in order to wash her. That's when she notices a window not being boarded up like in the room, with the sun slowly rising. The protagonist feeling humiliated and undignified, the woman slowly tries to take her clothes off when she thrashes around, preventing her from doing so. Surprisingly, she gives up and lets the protagonist into the bathtub with her clothes on, telling her next time she can just talk instead of acting up like a brat. Not that she kidnapped her and mentally broken her down to the point that she is afraid of speaking. The woman then goes on a rant, gaslighting the protagonist on how she doesn't appreciate her, despite everything that she's done for her, despite taking care of her while being swarmed with chores and work on a daily basis. All the protagonist can think of is how she lacks any empathy, being completely clueless that she's the one who's put her under all of this pain and misery. She's the kidnapper. But it seems in her mind she thinks that the protagonist is the one making things difficult. The conviction in her voice and her deluded mindset starts to slowly be hypnotizing, causing the protagonist question herself and her own judgment, as if she's the one at fault. At the same time, the kidnapper acts nicely, telling how much she cares about the protagonist and admires her. She goes on asking for forgiveness, asking the protagonist to give her one more chance to start from the beginning. The woman then asks the protagonist if she's got a romantic partner, to which she's speechless, unable to hide her confused expression, which makes the woman elaborate that she failed to find any details about her personal romantic life online. She further explains she hasn't had a successful relationship herself, surprisingly, as who wouldn't want to be involved with such a charming person as the kidnapper. After being washed, with the bathtub being filled and emptied with brown water, the woman cuts off the zip ties, giving the protagonist new large clothes that fit the protagonist, giving her time to fully wash herself. Noticing she can't walk, the woman helps the protagonist sit on the side of the bathtub while trying to engage her in a conversation. Soon, the woman helps the protagonist get on her bed, taking a chair opposite to her and sitting on it. While in the bedroom, the kidnapper engages the protagonist in a conversation, talking about her art and how wonderful they are. The kidnapper then shows her phone with a drawing of a character the protagonist drew, a character that looks very similar to the kidnapper. A drawing that changed everything, with the woman deciding to kidnap the protagonist after that. As the character was just a rough sketch with no name, the kidnapper demands the character should have a name, and since they look similar, it should be named after the kidnapper. The kidnapper then reveals her real name, Olivia, displaying that she is starting to trust the protagonist more. Olivia slowly unveils her true intentions, explaining that she's madly in love with the protagonist and that she wants to be with her. She continues giving the protagonist beautiful promises such as loving her, giving her space, not being abusive, making her feel safe, not making her feel hurt, and... oh, wait a minute. Feeling threatened by the instability of Olivia and the loose cannon that she truly is, who will most likely burst if she doesn't get what she wants, Olivia directly asks the protagonist if she feels the same way, to which the protagonist plays along, agreeing to her insane image of partnership and sharing a life. Olivia, being overtaken by dreams of love and affection, leads the way, instructing the protagonist to lay down on the bed when she follows suit. Protagonist, knowing the only way that she can survive is to play along, does as Olivia demands and wants, thinking all this is normal, being manipulative and crazy. She goes on saying how she's actually a good person and that the protagonist only saw her bad side and how the protagonist is lonely and needs her company. As Olivia goes on ranting how she's been a victim all her life, with all her exes being the bad ones while she's the one who put up with them and gave them everything they could never have. The protagonist uses this as distraction, snatching the knife from Olivia's pocket and stabbing her. Olivia being shocked, unable to recollect herself, the protagonist tries to take advantage and stab her again when Olivia gets to her senses and starts wrestling the protagonist, fighting for the knife. After a while, both trying to survive, the protagonist manages to overpower her and stab her critically, observing her slowly lose her life. Just as the protagonist tries to catch her breath, being in a panic, unable to believe what she just did, she realizes that Olivia had an accomplice, with loud footsteps approaching the door. The protagonist, as a last resort, picks up the half-lifeless body of Olivia, putting the knife against her throat when the door is kicked open with a man pointing a gun at both Olivia and the protagonist. The protagonist shouts with whatever energy that she's left, ordering the man to drop his gun as Olivia is still alive and she would end her life if he doesn't do what she asked. As he does so, the protagonist tells him the only way to save Olivia is to call an ambulance as she has lost a lot of blood. He calls the emergencies and tells them the address, but as they ask more questions, he becomes nervous and hangs up the phone. He quickly picks the gun back up and warns the protagonist if Olivia dies and she doesn't save her, he will come after her and kill her. That's when he rushes out of the room, escaping the punishment that he deserves. As the protagonist drops back to the bed, having exhausted all her energy, she lies next to the lifeless body of Olivia when she starts hearing the sirens. With her fate being undecided, not knowing if she will be convicted as a murderer, she is just happy for now to be safe, not even being concerned with what this stranger man would do to her if she's ever left unsupervised. In an alternate ending, being the bad one, the true nature of the kidnapper is revealed, and why she truly deserved what she got. Backtracking to when the protagonist is being fed the bowl of maggots, if she refuses to eat or spit her food out, slight variations occur before the protagonist is taken to the bathroom. In the bathroom, the kidnapper is much harsher to the protagonist, insulting her and condescending her, forcing her to crawl to the bedroom as she fails to stand on her feet. In the bedroom, the kidnapper pulls the protagonist's laptop from a plastic container, informing her how she picked it up from her house, using the key that was in the protagonist's pocket. She threatens the protagonist to give her password when she goes to her messages, showing her own messages to the protagonist, who acted nicely but ultimately ignored her. The kidnapper then goes on to explain how she is a fraud, acting cute and friendly online in order to sell an image of being a friend to everyone, while in reality she's sassy, referring to how she was shouting and insulting the kidnapper when she was kidnapped. The woman then proceeds to delete the protagonist's social media account, saying how she wants to delete her existence, to which the protagonist doesn't care much, realizing how insane the kidnapper is, being someone who is possibly very isolated, living in a virtual world only, thinking that it's all that matters. The kidnapper, being unstable, still being angry at the protagonist for not eating her bowl of maggots, she lunges at her and starts to stab her repeatedly. The protagonist, being defenseless, unable to walk, falls to the ground when the kidnapper picks up a gun and shoots her, ending her life there and then, telling her how her art was nothing special. That's before confessing how she was obsessed with her work and saw her as a god, someone who possibly shared a lot of resemblance to the characters that she drew, before all her admiration disappeared. As she explained, she is a very impulsive person. And that's it for the story, folks. It was more like a thriller crime than horror, but either way, it was fantastic. If you guys enjoyed this video, you can stay tuned for more by hitting on the subscribe button and the notification bell. And you can also DM me or send me direct messages on Twitter for any other games that you want to see. It's been your host, Star, and as always, have a fantastic day.